Hi guys, it's Miss Hickson again, and this is a reading lesson over chapter 35 through chapter 38 in Kate DiCamilo's book, The Tale of Despereaux. First thing that you need to do is watch the Plot Mountain video. So if you haven't watched that video yet, stop this video and go watch the Plot Mountain video. Once you have watched that, then we can talk about the plot elements from the video. And basically it introduced the exposition, the rise in action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. Another word for exposition is your introduction, then the rising action, the climax, the falling action, and the resolution or solution of your plot. The exposition is, it introduces the protagonist. The protagonist is the good guy in the story, and the antagonist is the bad guy. And the exposition establishes the setting, and then it shows you the point of view of the story and the perspective of the story. Because we have the first person point of view where the story is being told by someone saying, I did this and I did that. But then we have a third person where it says the mouse did this or the mouse did that, and that's called a narrator telling you a story. And a perspective may be you only know what the mouse does and you only know his perspective in the story. But sometimes you have an omniscient narrator, narrator, and that narrator doesn't just tell you what one character thinks and does, but it knows what everyone is thinking and doing. So it might be third person from the perspective of one character, or it might be third person omniscient. The next part of our plot mountain is the rising action. And the rising action is a sequence of events during which the protagonist struggles with the conflict. And so we know how to sequence a story. We know what happens at the beginning, the middle, and the end. And the sequence is the things that happen that lead to the climax. The climax of the story is the top of the mountain. And that is the part of the story that is the highest point of the conflict. And that's a dramatic moment when a change occurs for the protagonist. So if it is the story of Little Red Riding Hood, the protagonist is Little Red Riding Hood, and the rising action was her grandma, her mom giving her a basket, and then she went through the woods, and then she met a wolf, and the wolf was really scary. And then the climax was when she went into her grandma's house and there was a wolf. And so everything after the climax is called the falling action. And that's what happened after she met the wolf. And then there was the resolution. And the resolution, it wraps up the story. It's the solution to everything. And the solution to the Little Red Riding Hood story was that the huntsman came in and he helped Little Red Riding Hood get out of the wolf's belly. So that is our plot mountain. And so now that we have gone over that, we're going to get out our journal. So get out your journal because we're about to read our story. And we can label the journal on a blank page. Tale of Despereaux. That's the story that we're reading, Tale of Despereaux. And then we can put today's date, March 31st, 2020, like that. And then we can write we're going to start on chapter 35. Because that's what chapter we're on in the book. And like I said, we are reading The Tale of Despereaux. There's Despereaux. There's the red thread that we remember was tied around him when he got sent down into the dungeon. And this is the person who wrote the book, Kate DiCamillo. And this book has lots of chapters. We've read a lot of it. The back of the book tells us about the book a little bit. It says, what could bring together a tiny mouse with exceptionally large ears, a rat who longs for a world full of light, a lonely serving girl with a simple impossible wish? Readers, it is your destiny to find out. The narrator talks to the readers. He's an omniscient narrator. Our genre of literature, the genre of literature that is, it's a fiction story, and the genre is that it's a fantasy because it has magical things that happen in it. And the setting is a long time ago in a castle far, far away. It's a fairyland, and rats talk and mice talk, and there's a princess and there's a king, and a lot of the story takes place in the dungeon down below the castle, and then some of it takes place up inside the castle, inside the kingdom, and that's the setting of the story. The last chapter that we read, if you remember, Despereaux's, he had been down in the dungeon because he got sent there for violating what the Mouse Council said that they had to do, which is not talk to humans. And so he got sent down into the dungeon for talking to humans. And once he was down there, Meg came down to deliver some food to the dungeon guard, and he ended up getting on her tray and riding back up the steps up into the castle, into the kitchen. And when the cook saw the mouse, he told Meg to kill him, and she took out a knife and she cut off his tail, and he ran into the pantry. So that's what happened up until chapter 35. What we're going to do first is that we are going to look at some vocabulary that's going to be in our chapters. And that is the words pondering, gratitude, ominous, covert, sensibilities, defiant, dappled, and empathetic. Pondering and gratitude are going to be in chapter 35. The definition of pondering is thinking about something carefully. So let's get our book, our journal, and let's write down for chapter 35, pondering, right? Pondering. And then the other word is gratitude, the quality of being thankful for something. So write down gratitude. Pondering and gratitude. So pondering is thinking about something very carefully, and gratitude is the quality of being thankful for something. Now we're going to write one prediction for what is going to happen in the chapter that I'm about to read. Well, let me see. His tail just got chopped off and he's hiding in the pantry. So my prediction is that our protagonist, our lead character, Despereaux, will cry because his tail got chopped up. I'll say cry because his tail got chopped off. So write your prediction down. My prediction is that Despereaux will cry because his tail got chopped off. Okay, so let's start this off. Chapter 35, The Knight in Shining Armor. Despereaux was pondering the reverse of that question. He was wondering not what he would do with his tail, but what he would do without it. He was sitting on a bag of flour high atop a shelf in the pantry, crying for what he had lost. So we already used our word, pondering. And we knew what that meant. He was thinking very carefully about what had happened to him. And already my prediction came true. He is crying about that tail being gone. When we're reading this chapter, the questions that we can put in our head before we read are, what are the two main reasons why Despereaux was crying in the pantry? And what would you tell Despereaux at the end of 35? So we're going to answer those questions after I read the chapter. The pain in his hindquarters was intense, and he wept because of it. But he also cried because he was happy. He was out of the dungeon. He had been recalled to life. His rescue had happened just in time for him to save the Princess P from the terrible fate that the rat had planned for her. He had overheard the rat planning to do something bad to the princess, and he's in love with the princess. And it says right here that there was two reasons he was crying. He was crying because, number one, he got his tail cut off, but number two, he was just happy to be alive. He was happy to be out of the dungeon, and he was happy that he had time to help the princess. So those are the two reasons he was crying. It says, so Despereaux wept with joy and with pain and with gratitude. There's our other word, gratitude. He means that he was thankful. He was crying because he was so thankful to be alive. He wept with enthusiasm, or he wept with exhaustion and despair and hope. He wept with all the emotions a young small mouse who had been sent to his death and then been delivered from it in time to save his beloved can feel. Reader, the mouse wept. And then he lay down on the sack of flour and slept. Outside the castle, the sun set and the stars came out one by one, and then they disappeared and gave way to the rising sun, and still Despereaux slept. And while he slept, he dreamt. He dreamt of the stained glass windows and the dark of the dungeon. In Despereaux's dream, the light came to life, brilliant and glorious, in the shape of a knight swinging a sword. The night fought the dark. Let's get out our journal again, because while we're reading, a lot of times we take notes. So I wrote notes down. And my note is going to be a picture of Despereaux with his big ears. Here he is. There's Despereaux. And he's crying. There he is crying. And I'm going to make a thought bubble. And he's crying because he's in pain. So I'm going to put pain. And he's crying because he's happy to be alive. And he can save the princess. Save the princess. And the dark took many shapes. First, the dark was his mother uttering phrases in French, and then the dark became his father beating the drum. The dark was Frollo wearing a black hood and shaking his head no, and the dark became a huge rat smiling a smile that was evil and sharp. So he was crying in the pantry, and then he fell asleep, and now he's having dreams, and they're kind of scary. The dark, Despereaux cried, turning his head to the left. The light, he murmured, turning his head to the right. He called out to the night. He shouted, "Who are you? Will you save me?" But the night did not answer him. "Tell me who you are," Despereaux shouted. The night stopped swinging his sword. He looked at Despereaux. "You know me," he said. "No," said Despereaux, "I do not." Who is that knight? I'm going to write that in my book because that's a question that I have. Who is the knight in his dream? I'm going to put a big question mark because I'm a reader wondering this while I read. Who is the knight? Spelled Knight in Despereaux's dream. The knight stopped swinging his sword. He looked at Despereaux. "You know me," he said. "No," said Despereaux, "I don't." "You do," said the knight. He slowly took the armor off his head and revealed nothing. No one. The suit of armor was empty. Who do you think it is? No, oh no, said Despereaux. There is no knight in shining armor. It's all just make-believe, like happily ever after. And in his sleep reader, the small mouse began to cry. So he's crying again. So, after this part where we took notes on our chapter 35, we're going to write a summary. A summary is where you write 2 or 3 sentences to summarize what happened. And I'm going to put Despereaux cried himself to sleep. In his dreams, he dreamt about the dark and the light, and he saw a knight. In his dreams, comma, he dreamt about the dark and the light. And the third sentence I'm going to write is, he saw a knight, but no one was in the armor. I'm going to write on the side, I'm going to write summary of chapter 35. Okay. Summary of chapter 35. And it says, Despereaux cried himself to sleep down here at the bottom. And it says, in his dreams, he dreamt about the dark and the light. He saw a knight, but no one was in the armor. Okay, let's go back to the questions that we had about that. It was, what are the 2 main reasons Despereaux was crying in the pantry? We said he was in pain and that he was also crying with joy because he was happy that he was out of the dungeon and he had a chance to rescue the princess. He was grateful. He had gratitude. What would you tell Despereaux at the end of chapter 35? That's something for you to think about, and there's no right or wrong answer, because what would you tell Despereaux? I would tell Despereaux that I know you're in pain. I know your tail hurts where it got cut off, but you're gonna have to pull yourself together because Princess P needs you. That's what I would tell him. All right, now we're gonna read chapter 36. So, this is chapter 35. Let's turn the page and let's write chapter 36 at the top of it. Chapter 36. There are 2 words that we're going to learn in chapter 36. Ominous and covert. Ominous and covert. Ominous means giving the impression that something bad or unpleasant is going to happen. I think we've talked about this word before. And a lot of times I say that the sky was ominous, and that means there might be a storm coming, because ominous means giving the impression that something bad or unpleasant is about to happen. The other word is covert. And I think that word's come up in some of our reading before too. And covert means secret or not openly displayed. Covert, like a covert mission. If you're a spy, that means it's a secret mission. So let's first write down those two words. Ominous and covert. And then let's make a prediction. My prediction is that, well, let's read the name of the chapter first. The name of the chapter is What Mig Carried. So my prediction is that Mig in this chapter, that Mig will try to kidnap the princess. My prediction is that Mig will try to kidnap the princess. My prediction is that Mig will try to kidnap the princess. And then our questions that we're going to think about while we're reading is, what did Mig carry in her pockets as she climbed the stairs? And what does Roscuro plan to do with Princess P? So those are two characters in our book, Mig and Roscuro. And remember, Roscuro is the bad rat that wears a spoon on his head. And Mig is the girl that has cauliflower-shaped ears. Cauliflower is a plant, and she has big cauliflower ears because she got hit in the head. They say clout in the head by the cook and her dad and her uncle. They all clouted her in the ears. Poor Mig. And it says, Chapter 36, What Mig Carried. And while the mouse slept, Roscuro put his terrible plan into effect. Would you like to hear, reader, how it all unfolded? The story is not a pretty one. There is violence in it and cruelty. But stories that are not pretty have a certain value too, I suppose. Everything, as you well know, having lived in this world long enough to have figured out a thing or two for yourself, cannot always be sweetness and light. Listen, this is how it happened. First, the rat finished, once and for all, the job he had started long ago. He chewed through Gregory's rope. Gregory was the guard downstairs in the dungeon. All the way through it, so that the jailer, that's Gregory, became lost in the maze of the dungeon. Late at night, when the castle was dark, the serving girl, Miggery Sow, climbed the stairs to the princess's room. In her hand she carried a candle, and in the pockets of her apron were two very ominous things. And remember, we said ominous means that it is giving the impression that something bad or unpleasant is going to happen. And so there's two ominous things in her pockets of her apron. In the right pocket, hidden in case they should encounter anyone on the stairs, was a rat with a spoon on his head and a cloak of red around his shoulders. In the left pocket was a kitchen knife, the same knife that Miggery Sow had used to cut off the tail of a certain mouse. These were the things, a rat and a knife and a candle, that Mig carried with her as she climbed up the stairs. So let's take some notes. So mark in your journal notes. And then we can draw some stairs. We'll draw Miggery on the stairs. There's the stairs. And draw her with an apron on. I'm putting a candle in her hand. And I'm going to put 2 pockets on her apron. And there she is, with one arm so far, no hair yet. Her hair. I'm going to label our illustration. Here's her 2 pockets, and I'm going to put an arrow to one. And that's her left pocket, so it has the knife. It's down in her pocket. And then label her other one, Roscuro. What do you think the things in her pocket are foreshadowing in the story? In a story, when they foreshadow something, that's when the author gives you kind of a hint of something that's coming up to keep you enticed to want to read more. So there's foreshadowing that there's a rat in one of her pockets and a knife in the other one. And we're going to find out what it all means. So here's your picture. Okay, and let's take up where we left off. Gore, she shouted to the rat. It's dark, ain't it? Yes, yes, whispered Roscuro from her pocket. It is quite dark, my dear. When I'm princess, began Mig. Shh, said Roscuro. May I suggest that you keep your glorious plans for the future to yourself? And may I further suggest that you keep your voice down to a whisper? We are, after all, on a covert mission. That's one of our vocabulary words. Covert means secret and not openly displayed. Do you know how to whisper, my dear? I do, shouted Mig. She shouted it. Then please, said Roscuro, please institute this knowledge immediately. Gore, whispered Mig. All right. Thank you, said Roscuro. Do I need to review with you again our plan of action? I got it all straight right here in my head, whispered Mig, and she tapped the side of her head with one finger. How comforting, said Roscuro. Perhaps, my dear, we should go over it again. One more time, just to be sure. Well, said Mig, we go into the princess's room, and she will be sleeping and snoozing and snoring, and I will wake her up and show her the knife and say, if you does not want to get hurt, princess, you must come with me. And you will not hurt her, said Roscuro. No, I won't, because I want her to live so that she can be my lady in waiting when I become the princess. Exactly, said Roscuro. That'll be her divine comeuppance. Gore, whispered Mig. Yes, her divine comeuppance. Mig had, of course, no idea what the phrase divine comeuppance meant, but she very much liked the sound of it. Comeuppance means, just between you and me, that's when someone gets what's coming to them. That's their comeuppance. And she repeated it over and over to herself until Roscuro said, and then continued Mig, I tells her to get out of her princess bed and come with me on a little journey. Ha, said Roscuro, a little journey. That is right. Ha. I love the understatement of that phrase. A little journey. Oh, it will be a little journey. Indeed it will. And then, said Meg, who was now coming to her favorite part of the plan, we take her to the deep downs and we gives her some long lessons in how to be a serving girl, and we gives me some short lessons in how to be a princess, and we is all, when we is all done studying up, we switch places. I gets to be the princess and she gets to be the maid, Gore. Reader, this is the very plan that Roscuro presented to Mig when he first met her. It was, of course, a ridiculous plan. No one would ever, not for one blind minute, mistake Mig for the princess or the princess for Mig. But Miggery Sow, as I pointed out to you before, was not the sharpest knife in the drawer. That's a figure of speech. That's a metaphor. It's a metaphor because it's not a simile because it doesn't use the word like or as. It's just a metaphor. It's comparing Miggery Sow to a knife in a drawer, and it's saying she's not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So it's saying she's kind of dumb, and that's a metaphor. And reader, too, she wanted so desperately to become a princess. She wanted, oh, how she wanted. And it was because of this terrible wanting that she was able to believe in Roscuro's plan with every ounce of her heart. The rat's real plan, we're about to find out Roscuro's real plan. It says the rat's real plan was, in a way, more simple and more terrible. He intended to take the princess to the deepest, darkest part of the dungeon. He intended to have Mig put chains on the princess's hands and her feet, and he intended to keep the glittering, glowing, laughing princess there in the dark forever. All right, let's write a summary on what happened in chapter 36. So, you can make a little line. You can put summary. And you can put that Mig was climbing the stairs to the princess's room. Remember, a summary is just 3 or 4 little sentences that sum up a chapter or a story. Meg was climbing the stairs to the princess's room. The word princess, it already ends with an S. And we need to show possession, so we need to use a punctuation mark, an apostrophe, but instead of saying apostrophe S, because there's already an S on the end of princess, we're just going to put the apostrophe at the end. So whose room is it? The princess's. So we wrote, Mig was climbing the stairs to the princess's room, period. And make sure you start your sentences with a capital letter. She had a knife in her left pocket. We're going to make a compound sentence. She had a knife in her left pocket, comma, and there's your conjunction, and remember the comma goes right before the conjunction, and a compound sentence is when you put two complete sentences together to make one sentence. So she had a knife in her left pocket, comma, and she had Roscuro, capital letter because that's his name, Roscuro, in her right pocket. Oops. Period. She had a knife in her left pocket and she had Roscuro in her right pocket. This is a pronoun, she. Pronouns are short words that replace a proper noun, and the she right here is referring to Mig. So you don't have to write Mig's name over and over again. You just say Mig was climbing the stairs to the princess's room and she had a knife in her left pocket and she had Roscuro in her right pocket. For my third sentence, I'm just going to write that the plans were revealed. Mig and Roscuro revealed their plans. I'll say Mig revealed her plan, but Roscuro kept his a secret. That's another compound sentence. Mig revealed her plans, comma, but, there's your conjunction word. Remember fanboys. All of our conjunctions, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, and so. Fanboys. But Roscuro, Roscuro kept his plan a secret. Period. He was covert. They were both covert. Their plans were ominous. So there's my summary. You want me to read it again? It says, Mig was climbing the stairs to the princess's room. Remember, the apostrophe goes after the S. She had a knife in her left pocket and she had Roscuro in her right pocket. Mig revealed her plans, but Roscuro kept his plan a secret. Okay. That is the end of chapter 36. Let's go back to our questions that we had. What did Mig carry in her pockets as she climbed the stairs? She carried a knife and Roscuro. What does Roscuro plan to do with Princess P? Oh, he plans on having Mig chain her up in the dungeon and just leaving her there. So Mig's plans aren't as bad as Roscuro's plans, but they're still pretty bad because she wants to try to switch places with the princess. And she thinks that'll work. She thinks that she just puts the princess's clothes on and goes back up there, that everyone will think she's the princess. And that's what she thinks is going to happen. That's what she's trying to make happen. But I don't know. Roscuro knows that's not really a great plan. All right, we're on to chapter 37. The name of this chapter is Chapter 37, A Small Chapter 37, A Small Taste. Doesn't give me a lot to go on as far as what this chapter is going to be about. But our vocabulary words for chapter 37 are sensibilities and defiant. So let's get out our book. Let's turn to a new page and let's put chapter 37. And I put an abbreviation for chapter so I don't have to write out the whole word. I just put CH period. That's an abbreviation. That's when you shorten a word. Chapter 37. I'm going to write our two words, sensibilities and defiant. Sensibilities and defiant. Sensibilities is spelled Sensibilities, and defiant is spelled Defiant, defiant. Sensibilities are your awareness and response to things that happen. So you can either have good sensibilities or bad sensibilities. If you have good sensibilities, you would not touch a hot stove because you knew that it would burn you and that would hurt and you wouldn't want that to happen. So a person with good sensibilities would not touch it. And a person with bad sensibilities might be like, it's hot, but I'm going to touch it anyways. And then they burn themselves and it hurts and they feel bad. They had bad sensibilities. Our other word is defiant, and that's someone who resists behaving. So someone who is told, hey, you really need to be quiet, calm down, and they're just like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm defiant. That's a defiant person. They're like, no, I'm not going to behave myself. I'm defiant. So let's see how those words come up in our reading today. And let's write ourselves a prediction. And this one's going to be hard because the name of the chapter is just a small taste. So one thing that has been in this book is that the king of the kingdom, he's sad because his wife died. And his wife died on the day of her birthday when Despereaux the rat was up in the chandelier admiring the ballroom because it was beautiful and he loved the light. And then he fell into the queen's soup. And then when he fell in there, she just had a heart attack and died. And that was the day Princess P saw it was the rat, and she looked at him with disgust. And Despereaux went back to the dungeon. He was like, oh, the way she looked at me, I'm going to get revenge on her. So that's why Despereaux wants to lock the princess into the dungeon. But one thing that happened after that was that the king, he told the whole kingdom they were not allowed to eat soup anymore. And so they put away all the spoons and they put away all the bowls, and it was banned from the kingdom to eat soup. So the name of this chapter is A Small Taste. So I'm going to predict that maybe somebody is dreaming about eating soup because they probably miss the taste of soup since it's been banned from the kingdom ever since the queen died. So that's going to be my prediction that I'm going to write down. My prediction is that maybe someone is dreaming about tasting soup. My prediction is that someone is dreaming about tasting soup. my prediction that I wrote down. Okay, so let's go ahead and start reading and see what happens. See if our prediction comes true. Chapter 37, A Small Taste. She was asleep and dreaming of her mother, the queen, who was holding out a spoon to her and saying, "Taste this, my sweet pea, taste this, my darling, and tell me what you think." The princess leaned forward and sipped some soup from the spoon her mother held out to her. "Oh, Mama," she said, "it's wonderful. It's the best soup I have ever eaten." "Yes," said the queen, "it is wonderful, isn't it?" "May I have some more?" said the pea. "I gave you a small taste so that you would not forget," said her mother. "I gave you a small taste so that you would remember." "I want more." But as soon as the princess said this, her mother was gone. She disappeared, and the bowl and the soup spoon disappeared along with her. "Lost things," said the pea. "More lost things." And then she heard her name. She turned happy, thinking that her mother had come back, but the voice was not her mother's. The voice belonged to somebody else, and it was coming from someplace far away, and it was telling her to wake up, wake up. The pea opened her eyes and saw Miggery Sow standing over her bed, a knife in one hand and a candle in the other. "Mig," she said. "Gore," said Mig softly. "Say it," commanded Roscuro. Mig closed her eyes and shouted her piece. "If you does not want to get hurt, Princess, you must come with me." "Whatever for?" said the princess in an annoyed tone. As I have noted before, the princess was not a person who was used to being told what to do. "What are you talking about?" Mig opened her eyes and shouted, "You got to come with me, so after we take some lessons, you some long lessons and me some short ones, together way down in the deep downs, I can be you and you can be me." "No!" shouted Roscuro from Mig's pocket. "No, no, no! You are doing it wrong." "Who said that?" "Your Highness," said Roscuro, and he crawled out of Mig's pocket and made his way up to her shoulder and situated himself there, laying his tail across her neck to balance himself. "Your Highness," he said again, and he raised the spoon slowly off his head and smiled, displaying his mouthful of truly hideous teeth. I forgot to tell you guys what questions we're supposed to be thinking about while we're listening to this part of the story. For chapter 37, it says, describe Princess's dream. So we just had her dream. What happened? What was she dreaming about? And then describe how P was feeling when she saw Roscuro. Well, she was dreaming about her mom giving her some soup, wasn't she? And right now, Roscuro is appearing to her. So we can only wonder what she's thinking. She's probably scared, but let's go ahead and make some notes in our journal. So let's get out our reading journal. Chapter 37. Those are our two vocabulary words, and there's our prediction. And let's draw a picture of the princess. I'll make a crown on her head. I'm going to make her a little looking scared, because that's how she probably feels. She probably feels very scared. And then she's looking, I'm going to put arrows, at Miggery with her clout looking ears. her cauliflower-looking ears because she's been clouded. And Mickery is yelling at her. This is what I'm drawing so far. I'm going to label this Princess P. I'm going to say she's scared. Put exclamation marks. She has strong feelings. I'm going to put scared. Probably confused. I'm going to put scared and confused. Put scared and confused. And I labeled it Princess P. And I'm going to make Mig put her shoulders, because there is a rat on her shoulder. So I'm going to draw the rat on her shoulder with a spoon on his head. It's going to be hard, but I'm going to try. I drew the spoon. I'm trying to draw the spoon on his head, and that's his long nose. And put a dot for his whiskers. And his little that. Ooh. His cape. His red cape. And he's gone up to say his piece to her. Making his body, his big feet, and his hands. There's the rat. Wait, maybe make his ears. Maybe he'll look more like a rat. There he is. He's talking to her. I'm going to say, he's going to make a speech bubble, and it's going to say, do as I say. Do as I say. And she's like, just looking off because she's kind of crazy. I'm going to put Mig right here because that's Mig. So let's see what happens next. It says her heart skipped one beat and then two. It says, I think it would be best if you do as Miggery Sow suggests. This is Despereaux talking. She is, as you can quite clearly see, in possession of a knife, a large knife, and she will, if pushed, use it. This is ridiculous, the princess said. You can't threaten me. I'm a princess. We, said Despereaux, are all too aware of the fact of what you are. A knife, however, cares nothing for the fact that you are royalty. And you will bleed, I assume, just like any other human. The pea looked at Mig. Mig smiled. The knife glinted in the light of the candle. Mig, she said, her voice shaking the tiniest bit. I really do not think, said Despereaux, that Mig would need much persuasion to use that knife, princess. She is a dangerous individual, easily led. But we are friends, said P. Aren't we, Mig? Eh, said Mig. Trust me, said Despereaux. You are not friends, and I think it would be best if you addressed all your communications to me, princess. I'm the one in charge here. Look at me. The pea looked right directly at the rat and at the spoon on his head. Her heart skipped one beat and then two. Do you know me, princess? Roscoe said to her. No, she said, lowering her head. I don't know you. But reader, she did know him. He was the rat who had fallen in her mother's soup, and he was wearing her dead mother's spoon on his head. The princess kept her head down. There's a picture. This is the caption down here. It says, "Do you know me, princess?" It's Miggery talking to the princess in her bed. That's a good picture. She concentrated on containing the rage that was leaping up inside of her. Look again, princess, or can you not bear to look? Does it pain your royal sensibilities to let your eyes rest on a rat? So he describes her sensibilities as royal. And like I said, sensibilities is how you react to situations. And so as he's saying, does it pain your sensibilities to lay your eyes on a rat? I don't know you, she said, and I'm not afraid to look at you. The pea raised her head slowly. Her eyes were defiant. So she's going against what he's saying to do. Her eyes were going against him. She was like, I'm defiant. She stared at the rat. Very well, said Roscoe. Have it your way. You do not know me. Nonetheless, you must do as I say. As my friend, here has a knife. So get out of bed, princess. We are going on a little journey. I would like it if you dressed in your loveliest gown, the one that you were wearing at a banquet not so long ago. Banquet is a big feast, and that's what they're having for the queen that day. And put on your crown, said Mig. Put that on your princess head. Yes, said Roscoe. Please, princess, do not forget your crown. The pea, still staring at Roscoe, pushed the covers back and got out of bed. Move quickly, said Roscoe. We must take our little journey while it is still dark and while the rest of the castle sleeps on, ignorant, oh so ignorant, I'm afraid, of your fate. The princess took a gown from her closet. Yes, said Roscoe to himself, that is the one, the very one. Look how it sparkles in the light. Lovely. I will need someone to do my buttons, said the princess as she stepped into the dress. Mig, you must help me. Little princess, said Roscoe, do you think that you can outsmart a rat? Our dear Miggery Sow will not lay down her knife, not even for a moment. Will you, Miggery Sow? Because that might ruin your chances of becoming a princess, isn't that right? Gore, said Mig, that's right. And so while Mig held the knife pointed in the direction of the princess, the pea sat and let the rat crawl over her back, doing her buttons up for her one by one. The princess held very still. The only movement she allowed herself was this. She licked her lips over and over again because she thought that she could taste there the sweet saltiness of the soup that her mother had fed her in her dream. I have not forgotten, Mama, she whispered. I have not forgotten you, and I have not forgotten soup. All right, let's write a summary of what happened in that chapter. Let's get out our notebooks. Chapter 37. In this chapter, opens up with Princess P was having a dream that her mom was letting her taste soup. So our summary is going to say Princess P remember to capitalize it because it is a proper noun. It names a specific person, Princess P. was dreaming that her mom was giving her soup. Mig woke her up and she and Roscoe made her put on her crown and banquet gown so they could take her down into the dungeon. Since that second sentence that I wrote was so long, I'm only going to write 2 sentences as my summary. It says, Princess P was dreaming that her mom was giving her soup. Mig woke her up, and she and Roscoe made her put on her crown and banquet gown so they could take her down into the dungeon. Let's look at our questions for this chapter. Our questions were, describe Princess P's dream. Well, that was her mom giving her soup. Describe how P was feeling when she saw Roscoe. She was defiant, but she was also probably scared and confused. She recognized Mig because she and Mig had been friends, and she couldn't believe that Mig was telling her to do that. But Roscoe was like, oh no, believe it. Mig wants to be a princess, and she's pretty crazy. Okay, so let's look at chapter 38, and it is called To the Dungeon. So let's write down our vocabulary words for this chapter, chapter 38. And this is going to be the last chapter we'll do today. So write on the top of your page, chapter 38. And then you're needing to write dappled and empathetic from chapter 38. Dappled and empathetic. Dappled and empathetic. Okay, dappled. Dappled means marked with spots. So if something's dappled, it has spots all over it. I have freckles. I'm dappled. I have a lot of freckles. I'm dappled with freckles. Beauty marks. Empathetic means showing the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. If someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm homeless and I need some food, and you feel empathetic towards them, you're like, oh, I feel bad for you that that's happening to you and I want to help you. You're empathetic. You understand and you share with their feelings. You're like, oh, they're hungry and they're sad and they're scared, and I share that feeling with you. That's called having empathy or being empathetic. So let's go ahead and make our prediction for this chapter. It's called To the Dungeon. So I'm going to predict that indeed Princess P will be taken down into the dungeon in this chapter. My prediction is that Princess P will be taken down into the dungeon. Okay, let's read the chapter and see if our prediction comes true. The questions for chapter 38 that we can be thinking about while we're reading are, what was the darkness in Princess P's heart? And how was P showing empathy to Mig? Empathy is a form of the word empathetic. So our vocabulary word is empathetic, and if you look it up in the dictionary, empathetic might be in there, but it might not be. There might just be a form of the word in the dictionary. So one of the forms of the word empathetic is empathy. I have empathy for someone. I am empathetic. And so if you find a form of the word in the dictionary, you can figure out what another word means. If empathy is the feeling of, is the ability to share with someone's feelings, then to be empathetic means that you felt for someone's feelings. You knew what their feelings were and you felt for them. That's empathetic. Chapter 38, To the Dungeon. The strange threesome made their way down the golden stairs of the castle. The princess and Mig walked side by side, and Roscuro hid himself again in the pocket of Mig's apron. And Mig pointed the sharp tip of the knife at the princess's back. Ooh. And together they went down, down, down. The princess was led to her fate as around her everyone slept. The king slept in his giant bed with his crown on his head and his hands crossed on his chest, dreaming that his wife, the queen, was a bird with green and gold feathers who called his name, Philip, 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 without ceasing. That means without stopping. Cook slept in a too small bed off the kitchen, dreaming of a recipe for soup that she could not find. Where did I put that? She mumbled in her sleep. Where did that recipe go? It was for the queen's favorite soup. I must find it. And not far from Cook, in the pantry, atop a bag of flour, slept the mouse, Despereaux, dreaming, as you know, reader, of knights in shining armor, of darkness and of light. Remember? And in the whole of the darkened, sleeping castle, there was only the light of the candle in the hand of Miggery Sow. The candle shone on the princess's dress and made it sparkle, and the princess walked tall in the light and tried not to be afraid. In this story, reader, we have talked about the heart of the mouse and the heart of the rat, and the heart of the serving girl, Miggery Sow. But we have not talked about the heart of the princess. Like most hearts, it was complicated, shaded dark, and dappled with light. That means having spots of light on it. The dark things in the princess's heart were these: a very small, very hot, burning coal of hatred for the rat who was responsible for her mother's death. And the other darkness was a tremendous sorrow, a deep sadness that her mother was dead, and that the princess could now only talk to her in her dreams. Well, let's write some notes about that. So we're going to label this part of our journal page notes. And we're going to draw the princess's heart. There's her heart inside of her. And they said there was, let's read the description again. A hot burning coal of hatred for the rat who was responsible for her mother's death. And the other darkness was a tremendous sorrow, deep sadness. Her mother was dead. Okay, so this part right here of her heart was hatred for the rat. I can put Princess P's heart. Princess P's heart. And then we can put the rest of this was sorrow. That means sadness. Sorrow. And I'll put in parentheses, I'll put mom. That's why she's sad. It's from her mom being dead. And what of the light in the princess's heart? Reader, I am pleased to tell you that the P was a kind person. And perhaps more important, she was empathetic. There's our word. It means that you can feel other people's feelings and you can feel bad for them. Do you know what it means to be empathetic? I will tell you. It means that when you are being forcibly taken to a dungeon, when you have a large knife pointed at your back, when you are trying to be brave, you are able still to think for a moment of the person who is holding that knife. You are able to think, oh, poor Mig. She wants to be a princess so badly, and she thinks that this is the way. Poor, poor Mig. What must it be like to want something that desperately? That, reader, is empathy. And now you have a small map of the princess's heart: hatred, sorrow, kindness, and empathy. So since we drew her heart, we better dapple in the light. So this is the darkness, hatred, and sorrow. But let's put some spots on there. Kindness. She's a kind person. And let's put some more spots on her heart. Empathy. Let's finish the chapter. the heart that she carried inside her as she went down the golden stairs and through the kitchen, and finally, just as the sky outside the castle began to lighten, down into the dark of the dungeon with the rat and the serving girl. Okay, so let's write a summary of that chapter. This chapter, Meg held a knife to Princess P's back and walked her down the stairs to the dungeon. Meg held a knife to Princess P's back and walked her down into dungeon. Then the next part will say, we learned that Princess P's heart was full of, we learned that Princess P's heart was, instead of full of, I'm going to say composed of, because some of the parts were smaller and some of the parts were bigger, was composed of hatred, sorrow, kindness, and empathy. Meg held a knife to Princess P's back and walked her down into the dungeon. We learned that Princess P's heart was composed of hatred, sorrow, kindness, and empathy. Okay, let's look back at our questions. Our questions are, what was the darkness in Princess P's heart? The darkness was the hatred for Roscuro, and the sorrow was the other darkness was the sorrow, was the sadness she felt for her mom dying. How was P showing empathy for Meg? P was showing empathy for Meg because she felt bad for her. She was like, you know, poor Meg, what happened to her that she so desperately wants to be a princess that she's willing to do this to somebody because she knows that doing that to somebody is really bad. Okay, remember at the beginning of our lesson, we talked about the plot mountain, and we talked about the exposition or the introduction of a story, the rising action, the climax, falling action, and the resolution. Well, in your pack that you got from Waco ISD, there are there is a plot mountain. But we can't do this plot mountain until we finish the entire story. Because we haven't read the whole story of the Tale of Despereaux. We don't know what the solution or the resolution is. And in fact, we haven't got to the climax of the story yet. We're still in the rising action part. And so we're going to fill out this the Tale of Despereaux by author Kate DeCamilla. And it's going to show you, and it's in your pack, and it's half of a mountain. And it says comprehension, and it's half of your mountain. It has the introduction down here. And then it has rising action right there. And so what you put into the introduction what you put into the introduction is it introduces the protagonist and it establishes the setting, and it shows you the point of view of the story, or in the perspective of the story. And then you are going to be doing a sequence of events that make up the rising action. A rising action is a sequence of events during which the protagonist struggles with the conflict. So I'm going to read you what I wrote and what I put onto this, and then I'm going to let you do it by yourself. And then I'm going to make another video where we go over our answers, go over what I put into mine, so that you can kind of check what you did with yours. Okay? Okay, so for this one, I put The Tale of Despereaux, and I put Kate DeCamilla as the author. And for the introduction or exposition, I put Despereaux is a mouse who doesn't fit in because he has big ears, doesn't do mouse things, and likes to read and likes music. So that's introducing that character, Despereaux. Okay, and so for the series of events that make up the rising action, for number 1, I put he follows the sound of King Philip's music, talks to humans, and falls in love with Princess. This is for the whole book, not just for the chapters we read today. And then for number 2, I put the Mouse Council finds out and sends him to the dungeon. On number 3, I put, he rides a tray of food sent down to the prisoner guard up to the kitchen, the jailer. He rides a tray of food sent down to the jailer up to the kitchen. For number 4, I put, in the kitchen, he learns that the princess has been captured, and he knows it is an evil plot between Roscuro the rat and Mig the maid. And then for number 5, I put, he finds it within himself to go try to rescue the princess. So he has a plan that he heard about this plot, and he wants to go rescue her. So this is all the rising action of the story. And the climax is probably going to happen when it's a confrontation between Roscuro and Despereaux. That's probably going to be the climax of the story. So today, so you're supposed to do that on your own, and you can stop this video if you want to and work on it. So I'll wait a second. Stop the video and then work on your map. All right, welcome back. Okay, so let's wrap up what we learned today. Today we did chapter 35. We learned the word pondering and gratitude. We made a prediction. You can put a check mark if your prediction came true. We took notes, and then we wrote a summary. Our summary of the whole chapters was, Despereaux cried himself to sleep. In his dreams, he dreamt about the dark and the light. He saw a knight, but no one was in the armor. And then in chapter 36, we learned ominous and covert. We made a prediction. We took notes. Then our summary was, Mig was climbing the stairs to the princess's room. She had a knife in her left pocket, and she had Roscuro in her right pocket. Mig revealed her plans, but Roscuro kept his plan a secret. And then we did chapter 37, and we learned about the word sensibilities and defiant. We made a prediction. We took some notes, and then we read a summary of chapter 37. It says, Princess P was dreaming that her mom was giving her soup. Mig woke her up, and she and Roscuro made her put on her crown and banquet gown so they could take her down into the dungeon. And then finally, we read chapter 38, and we learned the words dappled and empathetic. We made a prediction, we took notes, and our summary of the chapter was that Mig held a knife to Princess P's back and walked her down into the dungeon. We learned that Princess P's heart was composed of hatred, sorrow, kindness, and empathy. We learned about a plot diagram. And this is the plot diagram that you guys made on your own. And I gave you examples of what to put into it about the Tale of Despereaux. And I will probably make another video in which I go over the plot diagram again. So we will see you next time. You guys have a good night. Thanks. Bye.